There is a very quiet moment that most people do not talk about enough. It is not usually dramatic. It happens in ordinary ways. You are scrolling or watching someone else's life, or just thinking about where you thought you would be by now. And then something shifts. A quiet thought appears. Why am I not there yet? Why does it feel like everyone else is moving faster than me? I've noticed that this feeling rarely starts as one big moment. It usually starts as something smaller. A comparison you did not mean to make. A passing thought you did not stop to question. A quiet sense that maybe you are not as far along as you should be. And if that feeling keeps returning, it begins to build. If you have felt like you are not enough, pause. Not to fix it, just to notice it. Because that feeling does not usually come from one moment. It builds. Quietly. Over time. From comparisons you did not even mean to make. From expectations you did not realize you absorbed. From moments where you told yourself, I should be further ahead than this. I remember how normal that kind of thinking can feel. It does not sound extreme in your head. It sounds reasonable. Almost responsible. Like you are just being honest with yourself. But over time, those thoughts connect. They form a pattern. Then a belief. Something that feels true simply because it has been repeated often enough. And that is where this gets heavy. Because once that belief settles in, you stop questioning the standard. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I am just not enough. That sentence can sound so convincing. Because by the time it appears, it feels like evidence has already been gathered. You have looked at other people. You have looked at your own life. You have noticed what is missing. And your mind turns that into a conclusion. But here is the part most people miss. You are measuring yourself by outcomes. What you have achieved. What you have not achieved. How far along you think you should be. And when that does not match the picture in your head, you do not question the measurement. You question yourself. That is such an important difference. Because the problem is often not you. It is the way you are evaluating yourself. I have noticed that many people do this without realizing it. They compare the visible parts of someone else's life with the invisible parts of their own. They compare someone else's outcome with their own uncertainty. Someone else's highlights with their own unfinished process. And that comparison will almost always make you feel like you are falling short. Because you see your doubts, your unfinished parts, your uncertainty, your private disappointments. But you do not see that in other people, at least not in the same way. So the comparison is not fair, not balanced, not complete. And yet, we let it shape how we see ourselves. Pause there for a moment. Because your life is not only made up of visible results, it is also made up of things that no one else sees clearly. How you kept going when it would have been easier to stop. How you handled things you never expected to face. How you adapted when life did not go the way you thought it would. How you are still here, trying, adjusting, continuing. Those things matter. But most people do not measure them. They measure what is missing, what is late, what is incomplete, what has not happened yet. And over time, that creates a very narrow version of who they are. A version made mostly of lack. That is not an honest picture. It is just an incomplete one. And incomplete pictures can feel painfully convincing when you look at them every day. So instead of asking, "Why am I not enough?" ask something more useful. What am I using to measure myself that might not be complete? That question matters. Because when it lands, something begins to shift. The pressure softens. The constant self-checking begins to quiet. And slowly, you start to see yourself more fully. Not perfectly, but more honestly, more completely, more fairly. And in that clarity, something becomes possible. You stop trying to earn your place and start recognizing that you already have one. That does not mean you stop growing. It does not mean you stop wanting things. It does not mean ambition disappears. It just means your worth is no longer hanging on an outcome. And that changes the way you move. Because when you stop carrying the constant weight of not enough, you breathe differently. You think differently. You show up differently. So if you feel like you are not enough, pause. You may not need to become more. You may simply need to see yourself more clearly. More than what is missing. More than what is late. More than what has not happened yet. And when you do, that weight you have been carrying begins to lift. Not all at once, but enough to breathe again. Enough to stop fighting yourself quite so hard. Enough to remember that your value was never supposed to depend on whether you had already arrived. Sometimes the shift is not becoming more. Sometimes the shift is finally seeing that you were more than this feeling allowed you to recognize.